So when it comes to carnivore, you hear that you can get explosive diarrhea if you start it the wrong way. So how do you ease into carnivore if you're only cycling in and out of it a couple times a year? Like, how do you start carnivore with avoiding the toilet?
Yeah, that's a good question. You're right. Like, if you're not going from a keto sort of approach to carnivore approach, chances are you're going to get the disaster pants, as Dave Asprey calls it. You're going to run to the bathroom. So, the name of the game is the liver. The liver produces bile. Bile is important for detoxification, but bile also breaks down fat. It's like a detergent for fat. So, obviously, when you do carnivore or even keto, you're going to increase your dietary fat and protein. That liver needs to produce enough bile to break it down. And if you've been doing like a high carb diet and a lower fat diet for years, that liver can't keep up. And to Candice's point, you're going to be running to the bathroom for days saying this is awful. So I would transition slowly. Number one, if you're going from a high carb, low fat to carnivore, have like a 7-day transition where you're gradually getting into there, and then by day 7 you're full on carnivore. But number two, I would support the liver, and you could do that by taking something that has like digestive enzymes with ox bile in it. Bile salts are great for the liver. You could do things for the liver like coffee enemas, and castor oil packs are terrific. You just grab a castor oil pack and you put the castor oil in the pack, tie it around the right side of your rib cage where your liver is, and go to bed with that castor oil pack. That helps support the liver. So the name of the game is the liver. And let's say you're doing all this and you're still having diarrhea. 7 days, 14 days in, you're doing the castor oil, you're doing the ox bile. Then the solution would be to have smaller meals more frequently. And this is the only time I would recommend that, because I'm not a big fan of like frequent eating, but your liver needs to have less fat in one sitting and spread the fat out. So if you're doing like 2 or 3 big carnivore meals a day and you're still getting diarrhea, then have like 5 or 6 smaller meals until your liver adapts. And it'll adapt within a matter of like less than 30 days for most people.
That's interesting too, because that was everyone just knew you were supposed to have 5 small meals a day, the size of your fist, and constantly be grazing. And looking back, that doesn't make sense because we were hunting and gathering and there was
Yeah.
no consistent food ever. So how was our body designed to constantly be eating? That never made sense. And I remember when I was following that advice from some like meathead bro at the gym was the time where I was gaining weight. And I'm like, I'm working out 5 days a week and I'm working out hard. What is happening? I'm shoving food in my mouth all of the time and I don't need to be. Of course not. I'm
Yeah.
not hungry. Why am I eating this?
You're so right. It's the quickest way to age yourself. Eat every 2 to 3 hours, and
Whoa.
it's the exact opposite of what we've been taught by mainstream nutrition. I always tell people that if you want to age fast, and anybody eat every 2 to 3 hours. Constantly graze, because you're going to raise glucose and insulin. You're going to start the digestive process. And here's a crazy stat: a colleague of mine, his name is Dr. Don Klum. He's worked with like different corporations, and he did a patient population survey where he had hundreds of these patients write down and document how many times they were eating throughout the day. And our definition of eating was any time you started that digestive process and raised glucose and insulin. So by this definition, it could be a full meal, or it could be the grazing. It could be the almonds, the kombucha, the protein shake. Anything that raised glucose and insulin was categorized as a meal. And the average person in this study was eating 17 to 23 times per day, which is one of the quickest ways to gain weight and create insulin resistance and age yourself faster. So we're not designed for that. We're genetically hardwired for feasting and fasting, these feast famine cycles. And that's where,
Hmm.
intermittent fasting comes into play, not grazing. That's not good for you.
I wanna get into fasting, but it's funny when you were talking about the role of bile and then being able, to increase your liver health to break down the fat. My grandma, so she's from Japan, and she would always kinda, like, smuggle stuff over that she wasn't supposed to when she went to go visit her family, and I remember she always had this glass vial of these tiny little silver beads in them, and anytime one of us was sick or vomiting or had, like, an upset stomach, she would try to get us to eat them, and then my dad would throw this fit and tell her not to, and I'd eventually as I got older, I'm like, "What is that stuff you would always try to give us that dad didn't want you to and you always said was illegal, but you had?" And it was bear bile. So she would smuggle this stuff in from Japan because I don't know if it's still the case. It wasn't legal in the States allegedly, and, the bile was supposed to help break down whatever was in your stomach, and it was taken from a bear. This is all from my grandma, so who knows if it's accurate or not, but that story just popped in my head, and I haven't thought about that in like 20 years. So I'm like, I wonder if she's got that good bile, so if I do carnivore, I can just have some of those bear beads and I'll be fine.
That is so fascinating. I never heard of bear bile, but hey, that makes total sense to me. I mean, there's ox bile, which is the most popular form in supplementation, but bear bile, your grandma knew it before we all did.
Way before ancient
She's pretty
wisdom.
smart. Yeah,
Ancient
exactly. Ancient
wisdom.
healing strategy right there.